growth doesn't come from hoping things change. It comes from behaving as if they must change. Welcome to the Growth Ready Coaching Corner, an opportunity to slow down for you to intentionally listen in and reflect on either an individual or a collective level of how you can make this particular insight part of your growth journey. Let's jump right into it. When you think of some of the most recognizable figures in U.S. history, Abraham Lincoln tends to be near the top of that list. All these years later, it's easy to see why he is held in such high regard, but during the first half of his adult life, you wouldn't have necessarily anticipated a success story. Abraham Lincoln lost a lot. He was rejected often. He lost multiple elections, saw his businesses fail, and he navigated so many personal struggles and even dealt with being diagnosed with depression on more than one occasion. In those formative years, there often wasn't much evidence that things were working. You would have assumed that young Abraham Lincoln must have sometimes thought, gosh, this isn't for me. I'm not cut out for this. Maybe this just isn't going to work. And these are responses and these are moments where we tend to learn a heck of a lot about our own perspective when facing growth. By now, you likely have at least decades of behavioral tendencies to look back on when it comes to the challenges and obstacles, specifically in how you respond to them. Do you hesitate? Do you overthink? Are you one of those that need total clarity or total reassurance that you should in fact keep going? I know I have over the years. Even when I'm motivated by the idea of what is possible, setbacks and hardships are enough to make me question myself, or to look back for proof that it will all work out. But sometimes there is no proof. Sometimes all we have is our commitment to the cause. And in the case of one of the fiercest leaders in American history, it's hard to imagine that Honest Abe didn't look at the evidence and honestly assess the situation with a bleak perspective. Even when he felt like he made progress and got one in the win column, it seems that he had the very next disappointment just waiting for him around the corner. Because that is what makes this work truly challenging. How at every stage of growth and from one step of success to the next, we face trials that come with ever so slightly higher stakes each time. In other words, your response to adversity is being tested at a higher level each time. It's a new experience, so your response system hasn't been tested at that level before. I watch this in high performers and leaders on a weekly basis. Highly capable individuals and teams who have leveled up in some way only to be met by yet another dose of reality at the very next juncture on their growth journey. So, each time we assess their response system, the behavioral tendencies that arise when they are met with force. Because most of us wish and hope for a different outcome. In fact, it's in our human nature to immediately wish that upon ourselves. But how can we shift from this hopeful mindset, this hope in a different reality, to one that is productive and to one that solicits action? The reason I chose Lincoln as our example for this episode, because if you look at how his life actually unfolded, it suggests that his response system is one that we can learn from. Whether Abe was stuck, doubtful, or avoiding an issue altogether, his actions prove he eventually reached a point of insistence. No longer hoping for an outcome, but insisting upon the outcome instead. Hope often sounds like, I hope this works out. I hope things change. I hope I'm on the right path. Insistence, however, sounds more like, this matters. I'm not done. I will keep going, whether it's working yet or whether it will work eventually. The difference between these perspectives might seem significant, but when it comes to our actions, there is more subtlety at play than we might recognize. Because hope can sometimes look and feel productive on the surface. But underneath it, there can be a subtle form of hesitation at play, simply because we have yet to get to the point of insisting upon the outcome. When I think back to my decision to become an executive coach and leave the sport of swimming, I told myself that this podcast could be my avenue to making a decision and shaping the direction of my future. Then I found myself 3 years later, after starting the podcast, looking in the mirror, realizing I was still a swim coach. I knew I wanted something else, and I even told those closest to me, but I had not yet arrived at the point of insisting upon the necessary behaviors to make it a reality. I wanted the reason to fully commit to present itself. But looking back, as I waited to feel ready, as I waited for clarity, and as I waited for some sort of a sign, my waiting was more of a place of comfort than I was ever willing to admit. And I want you to acknowledge that today too. If you are waiting for clarity or a sign, you are choosing convenience and comfort, because insistence is inconvenient and it is uncomfortable. And it likely doesn't make a whole lot of sense to others around you either. Which brings us back to Abraham Lincoln one last time. There's a moment in his life where that insistence became so familiar that there was never an inconvenient time to practice it. As the Civil War was ongoing and the country was divided, as pressure was coming from all sides, Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. He chose wartime to set the course of the eventual abolition of slavery. It wasn't a universally supported decision. It carried risk, political, social, personal backlash, with no guarantees that it would hold. But in his mind, it was aligned with what he believed mattered, aligned with the direction he insisted the country had to move toward. It was no decision built on hope. It was sets of established behaviors that produced consistent decisions over time. Behaviors summed up by an insistence to keep moving, without the need for the current step to be validated outside of those most familiar to him, or the next step, or the eventual outcome for that matter. To have arrived at such a historical act, it was not as simple as just talking it through. Such a decision at such a time could only be made thanks to an established pattern of behavior, an ability to pinpoint what matters and recognize the value that will come by acting on it now. And to do this time and time again, no matter the rejections or resistance that might have come before. To not wait until later. To not wait until it felt easier. To not wait until you have some sort of a guarantee. To simply act now. So if you bring this back to your own life, I want you to sit with some questions. Firstly, where are you currently operating from a place of hope instead of a place of insistence? Secondly, where are you waiting for something to feel more certain before you take a step? And finally, what do you already know matters to you that you have still yet to fully commit to? There will be evidence of an answer to all of these questions in your life because it's human nature. Because growth doesn't come from hoping things change. It comes from behaving as if they must change. And that doesn't mean you always get it right. It doesn't mean it always works. But it does mean you stop waiting for it to work. So, here's the challenge this week. Pick one area of your life where you've been hoping for something to improve and replace that hope with action. Not perfect action, not action all at once, but with enough insistence that your behavior finally reflects what you claim matters most. Because over time, that is what creates the outcome that matters most as well. Thank you so much for listening to my Coach's Corner. These are little passion projects every time I sit down and write them. Sometimes they come out really easily. Sometimes they can be tricky. And this one was a little more on the tricky side. But I hope you were able to stay with me. And I hope you took from this what I feel is an important message on the growth journey to keep going despite any resistance, despite any adversity, to simply understand that it's in the hesitation where we potentially hurt our ability to growth and where insistence can be the very ingredient required to make those steps and to see that progress that otherwise we wouldn't see. While you're here, take the time to subscribe to the show so that for any future Coaches Corners or our regular content of interviews that you don't miss out. And of course, take the time to always rate and review the show if you've yet to do that. For the meantime, best of luck with anything and everything you have going on in your world. And I look forward to doing this again with you very soon. Bye for now.
Thank you for tuning in to Growth Ready. If you liked what you heard and are feeling ready to grow, be sure to leave a 5-star rating, subscribe to the show, and share the episode with someone you know is ready to fuel their growth journey today. We love our community, so don't hesitate to reach out to us at podcast@growthready.com. And until next time, we are Growth Ready, and you will be too.